80 years ago today, World War II ended in Europe. In the West, it's May 8th. That's known as Victory Over Europe Day, or VE Day. And to be sure, unconditional surrender documents were signed in France on May 7th, 1945. They were designed to take effect the following day, but Russia ignored this for reasons that retrospectively actually seem pretty fair. The Soviet Union bore the extreme brunt of the Nazi war machine.
And no nation in the history of battle ever suffered more than the Soviet Union in the Second World War. At least 20 million lost their lives. Countless millions of homes and families were burned or sacked. A third of the nation's territory, including 2/3 of its industrial base, was turned into a wasteland, a loss equivalent to the destruction of this country east of Chicago.
Some 27 million Russians died during World War II. It is a loss unequaled in history. So Stalin took issue with the fact that unconditional surrender would be declared in the American zone of occupation. Hard to argue he didn't have a point, since the United States just got there with her second front 11 months ago. In a practical combat sense, the war ended in Berlin. American forces got to the city's outskirts first, but the decision was made by Dwight Eisenhower to halt the American advance. The choice was as much diplomatic as it was icy and practical. There was a recognition in the West, before the Cold War, that the incomprehensible losses our Russian allies sustained during World War II likely prevented Hitler from dominating in Europe. The Russians paid an obscene human cost beating back the Germans, and the feeling among American leadership at the time, at least in public, was that they deserved this symbolically important victory on the battlefield. It was the completion of Russia's revenge for the stab in the back and the siege warfare, the starvation of her cities, and the genocide of a nation. I'm going to insert a note here. There is a wonderful film that speaks to this fact. It's produced by the United States War Department in 1943. It's called The Battle of Russia, and it was directed by Frank Capra.
They asked for no mercy, and they gave none. This is the guerrilla army. This, the scorched earth. This, the Red Army. These, its leaders. These are the reasons why, although the Germans conquered land, 500,000 square miles of it, it was just land, barren land, scorched land. These are the reasons why, after 5.5 months of blitz warfare, after coming within sight of their goal, the Germans were stopped at the very gates of Moscow.
Captures the reverence America once held for the Russian people and their sacrifice, before Cold War tensions caused us to conveniently forget, before the American media education industrial complex reimagined America with itself at the center of the defeat of the Third Reich, and propagandized itself as the true saviors of the world during WW2. The Battle of Russia is in the common domain. You can watch it online for free. I will put a link to a clean copy in the video description. Anyway, the decision to sit on the sidelines for the penultimate battle of the Second World War in Europe wasn't just about giving Russia a well-deserved shot at revenge. The cold machinery of Ike's wits told him that this Berlin business was going to be one nasty fight. Germany was beaten, there could be no doubt about it, but those who still took up arms for her would rather die than live in a world without National Socialism. A hard, tough, dirty battle lay ahead in Berlin. American leadership knew it, and the end result of the war was by then a foregone conclusion. The Allies were going to prevail. It was only a question of when. So why let American boys die who don't have to? Thus, it was the Red Army that took Berlin, the final stronghold and symbolic center of Nazi power. It was a campaign that cost the motherland 360,000 casualties in just 14 days of savage street-to-street combat with the most rabid, fanatical remnants of Hitler's Reich. Russia had a legitimate gripe about the ways and means of surrender in France on the 7th of May. It wasn't a PR concession they could reasonably be asked to make, and they didn't. Stalin instead insisted on a second, more formal surrender the next day, and it was to be held in Berlin, with Russian media present in droves. Here I will insert another note. There's a second film I'd like to recommend to you. It's called White Tiger, a foreign language piece that is itself an allegory for Herman Melville's Moby Dick, but set against the backdrop of the Eastern Front with tanks instead of ships. The film skillfully and really pretty contemplatively captures this surrender scene, the drama, the triumph, the humiliation, the spectacle, and weariness. It's a really smart movie, and I'll probably do a separate video over it soon. It has also been made available for free by Mosfilm, which is the oldest and largest Russian film studio. You can find a link to their upload in my description. General Georgy Zhukov met with German Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, and by the time ink was put to paper, it was just after midnight in Moscow on May 9th, 1945, a day forever after known as Victory Day in Russia, 80 years ago today. So you probably know that in the West, VE and VJ Day are celebrated somberly, quietly. No big events, no major fuss. There's no interruption to your regularly scheduled sports or Kardashian or Love Island programming. It's not a national holiday over here. People go to work, and many of us don't even mark the passing. In Russia, though, Victory Day is a big deal. It's a federal holiday. It's described as a national day of mourning, pride, and triumph over Nazi Germany. It is probably the single most significant secular holiday in Russia to this day. And it's not just a day off work. It's the central pillar of modern Russian identity. There's a massive annual victory parade. In fact, as I speak, there are tanks on the road, planes in the air, and hundreds of thousands of people lining the streets of Moscow for the 80th anniversary parade. The Immortal Regiment will soon march to Red Square, holding framed photographs of loved ones who fought and died during World War II. It is treated with a near sacred reverence in Russia. There's a solemn respect for sacrifice that's nested in a sort of victory narrative, which emphasizes Russian endurance and heroism, solidarity. The war is remembered by Russians not just as history, but as the founding myth of post-war identity and the backbone of their national culture and substance. You have to remember, their country was invaded with extermination of its people as Hitler's stated goal. Around 27 million Soviets died before fighting ceased in May of 1945. With numbers like that, virtually every Soviet family was touched by this war. So you can understand why it's a deeply personal thing for Russians even to this day. Now, y'all know I have a big collection of Russo-Soviet stuff, and that collection includes some pretty exotic pieces, but the ones I'm choosing to remember this day with are the things they carried. A 1941 dated Tula TT-33, matching down to its original magazine. A glass canteen dug up from a trench last year near the Karelian borderline. A Red Army flashlight, still operational. A model 1927 Shashka cavalry saber, made in 1945. A sword that marched through the streets of Moscow for the first Victory Day parade 80 years ago. This is an important day for a lot of collectors and amateur historians. It's a day to reflect, to be grateful that we exist in calmer, saner times. The Soviet Union led the way in saving the world from Hitler and the Nazis. That's a good thing, I hope we can agree. If only the Soviet Union could have saved the world from the Soviet Union. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, be kind to the world as you bump into it. Peace.